Hello. First of all, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Well, hello everyone, and it's a great honor and pleasure to be here tonight with you. And I'm really missing Emily. I've never met her in person. I've met her online. I was really looking forward to meeting her here, but it was not meant to be. I wish to thank her, however, for the invitation to be here, to thank my colleagues, Dr. Christabel Anderson and Dr. Sasha, right? Alexeyevich, right? Alexeyevich? Right? I said it in Russian. Okay. And also Raja Al-Sarraj for all her help tonight and setting this up. Well, the title of my talk is The Neptic Icon and Orthodox Tradition. I have organized the talk in a series of vignettes that combine images with philosophical and theological reflections. Some of the concepts that I will be addressing are fairly complex, but I have tried to convey them in a simple way without diminishing them. And I hope that I have succeeded to a degree. Before I begin, I would like also to thank the A.G. Leventis Foundation for supporting my presence here in this lecture. And I hope to have the opportunity to meet Georgina, right? Yes, at the end of, after the talk. I will be happy to take questions from you. I think you're all here, and you should be asking the questions you want to ask at the end of my talk. So, let's begin. This is an image by the famous iconographer Panselinos. It was painted around 1300 at the Church of the Protaton on Mount Athos. And it is an image of Saint Ephrem the Syrian. Now, Saint Ephrem, of course, is famous for his poetry and his theology, or his poetic theology. When I look at this image, and I selected it because it conveyed to me a sense of vigilance, alertness, distance from things, isolation, if you wish, an intensity of presence, and a separation from the world. There is an austere quality about him. Reminds me often of the way that a spiritual father may occasionally gaze at one. A poem of his in translation by Sebastian Brock. Always just beautiful work that he does. Listen further and learn how lamps with thousands of rays can exist in a single house, how 10,000 scents can exist in a single blossom. Though they exist within a small space, they have ample room to disport themselves. So it is with paradise. Though it is full of spiritual beings, it is amply spacious for their disportment. When I read this, it's at first hard to put it together with the face of the saint here. He's away from the world, and yet, in his writing, he's right where the world happens. Lamps with thousands of rays and blossoms, with thousands of scents. A beautiful world that someone who has lived in isolation, who separates himself from the objects of the senses, seems to delight in. Of course, he draws analogies to paradise, but he finds these analogies in the world. There is, in Orthodox theology and in Orthodox life, in the experience of prayer, in the life of prayer, there is often this separation from the world and the return to the world. So this pattern of separation, of departure and return, this movement, I think, is essential to iconography. And I will come back to this theme later, right? So we step out in order to return. We close the eyes to the world in order to open them again. And when those eyes open with the grace of God, the world is renewed. You know that icons are painted and carved on pieces of wood or created on bronze, right? We find them on walls and stone and ivory. They're incorporated investments. They're things subject to the passage of time. They can be burned and destroyed. They're pictures, but they can be more than that. The conceptual and empirical home of icons is theology, simply understood as the quest for the living God in thought and prayer. And quest is a dynamic, right, relationship. It has a trajectory. It's in motion. And that corresponds also to a living God. Thought also is in motion, and so is prayer. Another way of approaching theology, defining it, but not in a closed way, not enclosing it, but just outlining it, delineating it. Theology is where the human logos, human word, speech, reason, all these together, opens to the divine logos, and the reverse. You see again, there is back and forth. It's not just one way. It's communion, it's interrelationship, it's interaction, it's participation, right? It is a kind of dance between the divine logos and the human logos. The life of the church is prayer. Prayer is the life of the church. In church, all the beings and realities that constitute it, because the church is so many things, right? It's people and buildings and priests and deacons and cantors and the faithful and all these things, right? Material, physical, noetic realities, and they exist through time, diachronically, like we do, those of us who are in church, those that we've known who were in church and are with us no more, right? So icons are instances and places of prayer. Notice that when we say place and instance, instance is in time, place is more solid, and yet the two come together. There's an interpenetrating, co-inhering relationship. Icons are sacred events. They're sacred spaces. Both. I have called this the Panagia of Amissos. It's from Samsun. It belonged to my grandmother when she and my grandfather, I never met them, came from Samsun in Asia Minor in 1922. I don't know if it belonged to her or she took it from a church. There were signs of, parts of it were burned. It has been conserved, I don't know how well, but it's much more visible now than it was when, when I found it actually, because I did not know we had that until my father's sister passed away. It was dated in the 19th century. Well, I know that she has come a long way, and she has seen a lot. Notice I speak of the image and its subject as if they are one. It is in the logic of the image to have a subject, to be an image of something, right? A beginning in something other than itself. I know, for those of you iconographers, that, and for the rest of us, that we often think of icons as having a beginning in the iconographer. It's natural, right? But please follow me in thinking that icons also have a beginning in their subject, in that which they iconize, in that of which they are and become an image. So it is in the nature of the image to have an origin, not only in the artist, but in some subject, in something. So I'm not sure how to separate them. The Mother of God and her image cohere. This is an important concept, theologically. More about it later. They bring each other to life. She becomes small to fit in her icon, like her son became small to fit in her womb. Fundamentals, right? Here now is a significant concept, the concept of perichoresis in Greek, perichoresis. It translates as coinherence, interpenetration. We have three coinhering persons in the Holy Trinity, two coinhering natures in Christ, the human and the divine. Moreover, the Son is in the image of his mother. The mother is in the image of her divine child. Aren't we all in the image of God, made in the image of God? Both moments are present. Here we go again. Both moments are present. As we start thinking about icons this way, we notice that they are theology's partners, not its instruments. This does not mean that they cannot function instrumentally, but they're not only its instruments. There's a partnership there, a participation of the icon in some profound realities. Last summer, I was at the monastery where I often go when I am in Greece, and that is the monastery of St. Dionysius on Mount Olympus. And because of COVID and because the church it was full, they had the doors open and people were standing outside or sitting outside. And there was this little fellow that I noticed sitting there, and I took a photograph of him. I was just struck by that noetic presence of his, that sense of interior life that's so visible. This is a photograph that I took without permission. Mea culpa. At the monastery with my cell phone. At the monastery of the Transfiguration of the Savior. I did not really know what I was going to do with it, but I was really struck by it. 14th century. The gilded cover, what we call ipokamision in Greek, the shirt, right, is from the 16th century. then I sort of put them together. Yeah. How? Why did I do that? It was not planned. It just happened 2 days before I sent my presentation to Reza. The boy's inner life appears. I see it. Nous, the Greek for intellect, mind, but also spirit, is present enargos, right, in a lively way, embodied here as a form of life. I see it. It's there. But it also surrounds the body, the young fellow's body, like a halo, and radiates beyond it like an energy field, the noetic life, of which the boy and Emmanuel partake. We, human beings, persons, live noetic lives. Sometimes we're all nous, in a vision. We become absorbed, right, lost in something, somewhere inside. The boy did not see me. I was standing in front of him, much closer than I am to Reza, about a meter away, with my camera, and it was a very conspicuous camera, because it's old. He didn't see me. The noetic life and the life of prayer go together, because in prayer we go inside. Of course, prayer is often vocal, but the vocal has an interior dimension. And when prayer is not vocal, when it's done silently, like in the Jesus prayer, those of you who are familiar with the Greek, Kyrie Jesu Christe eleison me, right? And when you, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, right? And that then is said silently. Right? It becomes a noetic act. We imagine figures, I'm thinking of icons, images, painted figures, carved figures, alive in this way, present before us like persons. Christ's inner life reaches beyond his icon through his gaze and expression. It enters our space, comes this way, comes this way. Noetic, what is inside, and spatial modalities, what is outside, right? From different worlds, here, now, then, and persons and times converge in that image. This is America, Virginia. It's a beautiful area, Virginia Eastern Shore, the island of Ascetical. There are icons that resemble this butterfly. They look beautiful in their stillness or when illuminated by candlelight, like this butterfly at sunset, but they're not alive. They stand there motionless, they don't breathe. Why must an icon and its figures breathe? Because they partake as image and imaged of life. The life of nature, the life of the mind and senses, human life, and the divine life. With all these, the iconographer is in touch, is in communion. No? Images are of beings. Even a simple line takes us to some part of the world in physical and mental space. There's a continuity between the two, the noetic, the mental space, and then this space here. In an icon or icon, the mind and the world momentarily are one. They have converged. And this is a dynamic state. The one is reaching into the other. They meet, they part ways, and return. As you understand, I'm asking you to start thinking about icons differently. Right? This is from my hometown. I am from Thessaloniki, by the way. I don't know if anyone else here is from Thessaloniki. Kalispera. Yeah. Tradition. The Greek is paradosis, right? To hand over. Literally, right? To give to someone's hands. Reach out. So to receive in one's time, now, what others have received and seen before. I would like to see the mother and her son, this mother and her son, in our world, since that is where tradition happens, right? Tradition is active, it's alive. It is given to us as we are, wherever we are. There is a dimension of divine philanthropy in this. I see the mother and her son standing, looking. I look for them, walking next to me. Yeah? It's not just my imagination. I go out in the world and I have the icons in my mind, and sometimes I see them, glimpses of them. I see these living, perennial icons. Today, I was on High Street, Kensington, and there was a man, a poor man on the street, and his hands were red. I don't know, maybe he was very cold. And this Orthodox rabbi came with a pair of gloves, and the rabbi was very short, and he bent over the man and put the gloves on his hands, right? And not only that, but then bent down and hugged him. Wow. Yeah. And there are saints of all kinds. So icons have their living analogues. They pass through each other. Think of the world of icons, particularly iconographers, you who live and study and breathe with icons, right? They pass through each other, right? The icons and human beings and the faces of this world, your faces, right? Like the moon and the clouds, right? Passing through each other, like eternity and the present moment in the liturgy and in life. Some moments in life are like eternity, aren't they? They never end. At that moment, right, the instant and the eternal, they cross. They partake of each other. If I were an iconographer, I would strive to paint an image that shows that movement, maybe to film or dance one. It seems to me that tradition leads me to think that it is intermedial, that it invites not just images, but movement, right? and sound, all those things that make the liturgy. The liturgy is intermediate. Those of you familiar with the liturgy, whether it is in the Latin Rite in Roman Catholicism, of course the Orthodox liturgy, right? Sometime in 2011, this icon, which is not a painted image, it's a print on a wood panel, started streaming myrrh in Taylor, Pennsylvania. Taylor, Pennsylvania is a little town. A lot of people who voted for President Trump live there. They're very poor. And the icon was gifted to the priest of St. George Ukrainian Orthodox Church. That community was Greek Catholic Ukrainian, and then the entire community converted to the Orthodox Church. And the icon was streaming continuously from 2011 until recently when it stopped. Now, we were talking about tradition, right? So we're expanding the concept. Let's think a little bit. This is a plain paper icon. It's a copy of a hand-painted original. The drops and streaks on its surface are the myrrh. The image is not a very good one because they had a glass over it, and so I had to photograph it through the glass. Divine grace, charis in Greek, works through things as they are. I remember many years before that, I was having a conversation with Mother Olympias at the Greek Orthodox Monastery of the Holy Protection in Pennsylvania. She's an iconographer and a very good one. And of course, I was telling her all my aesthetic things and all those things that we in aesthetics and philosophy say about icons and this. And she said, you know, by the way, this was done in her monastery, the copy and the original. But back, I think it was 2006 or 7 or something like that, she said to me, you know, if God wants it, even a paper icon can bleed myrrh, right? Can stream myrrh. Okay, right? So it doesn't matter how humble the image is. Right? St. Maximus the Confessor calls this way of approaching beings, right, with reverence for their circumstances and their condition. This way of approaching them through grace calls it ephsevia, right? Reverence, holding something sacred, yielding to its presence and way of being. Another word, agape, right? Love. Like ephsevia, agape yields to the other. Right? They have this yielding dimension, this open dimension. You open yourself to the other. An iconographer reverently and agapeically makes icons out of tradition and her world. A gesture modeled on divine philanthropy. The iconographer has philanthropy. And not only philanthropy, but may I use this word, philokosmi, right? They love the world, nature, everything, right? She brings tradition to life in her work and times. Almost like a carrier, right? Someone through whom tradition reaches. 2023. But she also brings her life and times to tradition. It's a mutual gifting. The one is made for the other. Our time and tradition. Now notice in parentheses I have this word, hyopneumatic. It means holy spiritual. Right? Hyopneumatic plasticity. Right? Plasticity also has this sense of being malleable, right? Of being open to being shaped. The iconographer is open to being shaped. Tradition is open to being received and shaped and reshaped and reshaped and reshaped and reshaped. So it is a process. in which one partakes. And we do the same with theology. You know, I enter the world of St. Gregory of Nyssa. I enter the world when I study. I enter their text, and through their text, as much as I can, their time and language and experiences, as much as I can. There are limits. Summer of 22 again. If you look somewhere in the middle of those mountains in the background, vaguely, you can see the tip of Mount Athos. So this is Chalkidiki, the Cassandra Peninsula. And of course, this is called ησυχία. Tranquility, quiet. In Greek, it's like shh, ησυχία, shh. Right. So we have a seascape and two ascetical concepts. Now we're going to get into asceticism a bit. The first one is nepsis, from which the title of my talk. Watchfulness, right? Vigilance, being alert, like someone on guard. Right? And ησυχία, tranquility, silence, quiet. Nepsis, in the ascetical tradition, is the guarding and clearing the mind and the heart, of the mind and heart. Nepsis, this vigilance, right, this standing guard, keeps the winds and waves of the passions and our fantasies and delusions away. As the mind does that, guards itself from intruders, it rests. The more successful it is in this, the more it rests. In ησυχία, thoughts do not arise. Images do not arise. All is quiet. All is empty. God enters as into an empty room and converses with the heart, Greek kardia, right? Deep inside the mind. God and the heart are now alone. We spoke earlier about the prayer of the heart. That is where that prayer culminates. So now the heart, the mind, the heart are like a nuptial chamber. When the sea is calm, rarely is, but that evening as I was leaving, was the last day I was there, I just turned around and saw that, and I figured, oh, okay. When the sea is calm, it becomes limpid. Bottom and surface are one, as if there's no distance between them. But even as they appear as one, they're still standing apart. They exist through each other in synergy. Synergia in Greek, right? When two things operate, function, are alive together. From Cassandra to Ceres. The holy monastery of Timaeus Prodromos in Ceres was founded in the 13th century. One of the oldest. And here is St. John the Forerunner, the patron of the church of the monastery, 1852. I love the colors in this one. It's just the blue and the green. But if you look at the inscription, it says αυτή η ιερά ζωγραφία ζωγραφίστη. This holy zographia, right? Painting, but literally something painted from life, painted alive, right? So this holy zographia was painted alive. Life paints first, art second, but they also paint together. Right? We separate and we unite, and we separate and we unite. Εικόν in Greek, right, literally means a likeness to something or someone. A painted portrait resembles, apikonizo is the Greek, apikazo. You notice that it has ikon in it, right? Ikonizo, ikazo. Right? Resembles a person in some way. Ikon overlaps with zographia. Both are open and fluid terms, like life. I think this has implications. Right? Life happens. It's not fixed. Even when it appears fixed, it happens. We paint the ways a living being appears or makes itself visible. As it is painted, it comes to dwell in its image and passes through it in rest and motion. Think of a photograph, one of your photographs. You're in it, but you're also passing through it, right? You were there before and you're there after. Right? I mean, you have left something behind like a trace. The photograph is a trace. It is still, it is framed, but it is a trace. Right? You've left it behind, your photograph, and you went on, right? So a living being dwells in its image and passes through it in rest and in motion. Image and image partake of each other's being. The saint looks happy. To me, at least, he's inviting. I don't mind the wings. I could just go closer and speak to him. Say, hi, I'm here. I imagine him as a man of his time, a shepherd, running down the slopes of Mount Menikion, where the monastery is. It's a beautiful location, isolated though. Now, a rite, an icon. Some people speak of icons, our way of iconography. Why not paint a holy form of life? You know, writing, painting. I think the life aspect of zographizo, right, is so important. But the analogy to writing may work in some cases. Here's one. Again, from the Museum of Byzantine Culture in Thessaloniki, a very interesting St. John the Forerunner. When I showed him to my dear friend and significant iconographer in America, Father Silouan Justiniano, some of you know him, he said, look at his mouth, how sweet it is. I hadn't noticed that. Some icons have a print-like quality, like woodcuts. They recall holy relics or miraculous imprints left on wood and walls, like the achyrοπίητε. Now, think of the word skinoma. It means the bodily dwelling of the soul, right? The tent, skini is tent in Greek. But the body is the tent of the soul, what covers and houses the soul. So think of the icon as the saint's skinoma, right? His incorruptible body, like an impression of that body. Immediately then we start thinking of icons as relics, as having this relic dimension, right? When an icon is copied, as so many are, the original, the iconographic type, is like a screenplay, right? Or musical score. So the iconographer, unlike a scribe, interprets it, right? As actors or musicians do. But iconographers do not only interpret. Some iconographers are like playwrights or composers because they paint icons that are familiar and unrecognizable at the same time. Like Christ in his post-resurrection appearances. If you remember, after the resurrection, Christ appeared to the students, to his disciples, right? And they didn't recognize him. They walked next to him, but they didn't recognize him until he said some things and did some things, right? So there was familiarity there, right? And I'm thinking that perhaps there are icons which are not just interpretations of types, but they are originals in tradition. It almost sounds like a contradiction, but they are originals in tradition. They're at once new and old. You see, I'm saying things that often appear to be contradictions, right? In opposition. Yeah. From Athens now, an icon originally from the town of Veria, 15th century. I've taken photographs of this icon many, many times without really knowing what to do with it, but always being impressed by it in some way. So, this Christ is carved in my mind. He's easy to remember. I close my eyes, I can see him. He's meant to be seen up close, almost touched. There's some tactile dimension to him. He stands between the frame and the viewer's space and makes one pay attention, be watchful. He's here. Right? When I stand before the icon, I cannot be absent-minded. I have to gather myself and be in the presence. The setting of the icon recalls a stage, right? They're pointing at him. See? His face is sweet, his body almost wooden, as if carved. Are the man and his cross one? He seems to have fallen asleep, like the King of Glory, which is the great passion portrait of Christ that Hans Belting has extensively studied. Now, I would like to see Christ as a man of our time, crucified then and now. I would like to see him as contemporary and diachronic, as timeless. Icons, I think, and iconographers think, actually this is something an iconographer said, icons can contain different historical times because they exist in God's time. Not only the time of Christ or the time of the saint's life, other times too can exist in the same space. Eternity. And this iconographer who said this painted, it's two iconographers, the two brothers from Thessaloniki, and they did some work at the monastery of the Holy Protection in Pennsylvania, where that icon that streamed myrrh was made. And as you see here, they're like the 4th century and so on, you know, like the Saint Pachomius doesn't look like he's dressed appropriately to the 19th century, but Saint Nectarios here is dressed according to his time. But the scene here is very contemporary in some ways, and these may even, seem like fiberglass boats that just don't look. There's something of the contemporary in this, and certainly more than just one time. And also this image from the Orthodox shrine of St. Nicholas at the World Trade Center in New York City. Again, it's obvious, right? We have more than one time frames here. Now, how this can be done and all these other issues that may arise as a result of this, So from Xenophon du Monastery. I included Chagall's crucifixion because it's an icon in some ways of a particular time. I included it as a way of reflecting, like prompting myself to reflect on images, on icons. It's an icon, put it in parentheses, because it seems contemporary and timeless. Jesus could be any man. This Jesus could be any man now, right? With or without a cross. Here, of course, he's Jewish because he wears a talit. He has the sudarion, there's the menorah, and the context, of course. The cross is suspended inside a beam of light. There is this here there, and the chaos around it. Of course, Chagall grew up in Russia in a Hasidic family. And some of his paintings of rabbis are very close to icons in their composition. Perhaps the crucifixion is an image for contemplation, but not for veneration, because there's too much of the world in it. In icons, see what you think about this. In icons, the world becomes a paradisiacal, ideal image of itself. It is not healed and transformed in its present, imperfect state. Like this image on High Street, Kensington, today of the rabbi and the beggar. It's our world, recognizably, 2023 or some such time. But in an icon, you wouldn't see that. Icons are detached, typological images. Take the gospel demoniac. We're going to see more of that later. That demoniac is the type of the tormented, delusional person. Any such person, anytime. We see our demoniacs in that archaic type as in a mirror. More about this later. Near the city of Castoria, which is famous for its Byzantine and post-Byzantine churches, and its lake, is the monastery of the Nativity of the Mother of God in the historically important town of Klissura. And there lived a contemporary saint, Saint Sophia of Klissura. This painting is circa 2011, this icon. It's kept near the saint's relics at the monastery. She was an ascetic, a fool for Christ. She slept on the floor, dressed in very, worn out clothes. It was very cold. She lived a very austere ascetic life. Having been there a number of times, when I see this icon, I immediately recognize the location. The monastery looks like a fortress. The forest is thick. The road, even, like in December, which is not exceedingly cold, is icy. The mountain is cold. The bear is there because wild animals loved her. She's dressed like a Greek peasant. She came from Asia Minor, from Turkey in 1919, a widow, having lost also her child. You see the bear and everything, right? Around her, we see the iconic cliffs, trees, and scroll. Here's a question. Do the stylized cliffs and trees and the halo make her look holy? In her photograph that we're going to see next, she's quiet, simple, and detached, and seems closer to a saint in her photograph than she does in her icon. It seems to me, I could be wrong, when I put the two together, I want to go to her, not the other one. I just want to reach out through time, there, and find her there. When I went to Metsovo a number of years ago, for the first time, I had a wonderful host who used to go to Mount Athos a lot. And he also had a shop. And he sold jewelry because that was the family business. And, but he also had some icons. And the first time I went, this icon caught my eye. I left, came back the next year. This icon caught my eye. And finally, I bought it from him. It's made on Mount Athos. I tried to call the cell of the resurrection of the Lord, Kelitz Anastasios Tsakiridou. But I was not successful. But I will keep on trying and talking to friends about who go to Athos, because I wanted to ask Father Paisius's permission to show this. But in any case, this is, of course, a copy of the original work by Panselinos, right? St. Theodore Stratilatis. Again from the Protaton. We'll come back to this image, and then we have another one. As one reaches out to God in Neptic prayer, keeping the mind clear of thoughts, emptying the mind, dualities gradually dissolve and contraries reconcile. Concentration eliminates distractions and gives to the mind and heart and the entire person a sense of vital unity and tranquility that are absent from ordinary life. Nepsis, eventually, will free the mind from its usual activity, and then the inner life will surface. Because on the surface we have, the noise of the everyday mind, right? The noise of the mind that engages the world all the time. In, out, and our phones and all that, right? In, out. But beneath that, underneath, there's another dimension which then surfaces when the mind stands still. The world, when that happens, right? When the mind settles and then the deeper mind surfaces with the grace of God, because someone can speak in similar terms about meditation in Buddhism, right? When this happens, the world is seen with new eyes and senses. And of course, we have the expression new creation, keniktisis, right, from the Gospel, from the St. Paul. A contemporary iconographer presents us with another image. I think both icons are neptic. In a neptic icon, beings are in a state of ontic vigilance. Ontic refers to vigilant in their way of being. Ontic, on in Greek, being, right? Ontic, that which pertains to one's being. So they are in a state of ontic vigilance and transformation. They have a hypostatic intensity. right? They exist in an intense way, and that is visible in their flesh, right? In their physical dimension, in their physical being, like the subjects of St. Theodore and the icon of Christ. It's an intensity that speaks, a visual utterance, a silent logos. I go back. One. More about this. We know that the inner and outer lives of persons, our lives, right, cohere. We're never just bodies or never just minds. The body's physicality, right, has an intellective, noetic quality. We carry our bodies the way we carry our thoughts. We carry our thoughts the way we carry our bodies. There is an interconnection between the two, a communion. Nous is incarnated in a person's physical life. You know, an idea, particularly one that we have lived through many times and has become part of us, like a vioma, we say in Greek, right? Something that has been lived and lived and lived and lived, it becomes part of us. In the Neptic icon, this natural coherence of opposites is more explicit, right? You have the physical and the mental interpenetrating, participating in each other. In the icon of Christ, flesh is suffused with energy. That's the thing that struck me about it, right? I was trying to touch it and I couldn't. It's always like Christ after the resurrection, you know, it's like the noli me tangere, right? Don't touch me, right? Do not touch me. But there was this sense, you know, that I was trying to get close to it. No, right? So it forms and dissolves. The vibrant inner life of the saint is visible on St. Theodore's forehead and in his eyebrows and eyes. I've spent a lot of time with this icon, maybe too much. I have it in front of me when I work, and I look at it every day. Like when I was doing photography back in the days, one of our teachers had told us, put your photographs on the wall and live with them. You will learn from that. I do the same thing with icons now. They teach me things. The two icons are Neptic and anarchic. How about the 11th century, right? Late 10th, early 11th, an illustrated image, right? By the most likely attributed, and I think we can be fairly certain about that, to Pantaleon, an artist with a reputation in his time for painting images enargos, in a lively, animated way, making them so lively that they seem to be right here before us. Enargia. I worked on that in the first book, right? It's a very ancient concept. You know, we find it in Plato, for instance. It often has to do with the presence of a god or divine being, right? The manifestation. So what is enargia? The interior liveliness that brings an image and its subjects to a self-expressive state. A state similar to that of human intentionality and personhood. You know, we see intentions in people, don't we? Right? We see intentions forming, coming toward us, right? Kindness, joy, you know, like someone is happy to see us. We see that. It's just coming toward us, right? Personhood is about that, right? It's about this reaching out. So enargia and personhood, they're very close. An enargic icon projects its contents beyond its frame and into the viewer's space. Now, an icon can be enargic but not neptic, or it can be both. The Pantaleon miniature, let's go back a little bit, just take a peek at it. right? Here we have the martyrs that were sewn into sacks and thrown in the water. And then the whales, here they look more like dolphins, came and took them to Alexandria, Egypt. The Pantaleon miniature is anarchic because its figures are alive in iconic space. The image is happening here and now, an event, a life moment, here, almost like a photograph, like a snapshot. It is neptic. Here, I try to be specific because in philosophy we're trained that way, right? So it is neptic because it unites and transforms eschatological and temporal realities and contraries, right? Like life and death, executioner and victim, human and divine time. It's the convergence of these oppositions and the transcendence they imply, right? Because when oppositions converge and dissolve, something new surfaces. That's not a new idea, Hegel, right? In neptic icons, the world is renewed. Kenurgin, again in St. Romanos Melodos, the 6th century great poet, is the ontological transformation and redemption of humanity by the incarnating Logos. So when Christ is conceived and grows, like inside Mary, that whole movement is kenurgin, is renewal. Is a renewal of humanity, and by extension, a renewal of nature and the world. Now let's try a neptic icon painted in words. We have an ascetic who is also a poet, St. Hesychios the priest, where in the Philokalia, translated of course beautifully by Palmer, Gerard and Father Callistus Ware, here is the image in words. A heart that has been completely emptied of mental images, right? The Greek is xenothesa, has been separated, has been estranged, right, from images, or emptied, gives birth to divine, mysterious intellections that sport within it. He writes, St. Hesychios writes that, like fish and dolphins in a calm sea. A neptic father, an ascetic, away from the world, gives us an image of the world that is full of life, right? Almost like cinematic. You can just see it unfold in front of you. Anyone who's been to Greece in summer, right? The sea, the dolphins. But in America too, we have a lot of dolphins there as well, schools of dolphins. Okay. So in Greek is νοήματα σκυρτώντα θύατα και μυστηριώδη. The sea is fanned by a soft wind. Oh, come on. An ascetic. An ascetic. The senses? The senses. The senses, please. The sea is fanned by a soft wind, right? The heart's depth by the Holy Spirit. Depth, avisos, abyss, right? And so the Holy Spirit here comes and caresses, right? The heart. Whew. What is this, right? You see, that's an ascetic writing this. The two brothers from Thessaloniki, my hometown, at the monastery of Whitehaven, St. Nectarius living in Alexandria, where he was persecuted in 1889. That's the year that he left Alexandria, right? But I thought, why not, right? Here's the breeze and the saint in prayer. The analogy to the sea suggests the openness of the heart that has abandoned impassioned images and free from the disturbances these may cause, can now survey its inner depth. This is the turn inward, right? I become a landscape, like a sailor surveys the open sea, right? Out of that imageless, aniconic tranquility, new meanings arise, and they are alive with a mysterious and divine energy. I'm following Tsakiridou here, right? That makes them surge suddenly out of the mind's placid surface, as if they were leaping fish and somersaulting dolphins. Tsakiridou, back when? St. Sophronia of Essex, here, on the aftermath of theosis, and an artist by disposition and practice early on, right? As the energy of the deified, he writes, as the energy of the deified imageless mind subsides, new sensations and new thoughts about God and the world are generated in the soul. In the ekphrasis of Tsakiridou, nepsis is hidden in the heart. Of course, nepsis is always inside. But what happens there is not alien to nature and experience. Animated by the Holy Spirit, the mind joins together the movements observed inside its own space and the movements observed in nature. Otherwise, he couldn't have written that. He couldn't have written what he wrote if he hadn't seen it, if he hadn't joined the inner space to the outer space. Words and images then return re-energized. I'll say in this, how many of you here understand Greek? Ζωντανεύουν οι εικόνες και ο κόσμος ζωντανεύει. So it's a form, images come alive, the world comes alive. It's a form of resurrection. Right? It's an anastasis. It's a way, of looking at things with new eyes. The Neptic mind is the hagiopneumatic, the Holy Spiritual spring of iconography. It is where the iconographer's senses are renewed, and tradition, all that one has received from the church and its lived realities, comes alive through grace. It's like a baptismal pool, right? A spring. But the pool the water may not be moving, but the spring is like constantly renewed. Yeah? And here is the icon, the image with the demoniacs, 1522. Kastoria, again. If you ever go to Greece and you're interested in Byzantine and post-Byzantine images and churches and so on, you have to go there. Evstathios Iakovou is the painter. Christ healing the demoniacs. Now, I took this photograph many years ago. I did not know what to do with it. I only knew that I had to just take it with me. But now it has a place. It's from the monastery church of the Mavriotissa, the chapel of St. John the Theologian. In this Mavriotissa fresco, Christ encounters the demoniacs. He's receptive and tranquil. The meek silence of God. Just look at him. And also notice his left hand that is touching the hand of the demoniac in the foreground. It's hard to see, but you see that all the way down there? The two hands are touching. The agitation of the demonic, the possessed man's parisia, boldness, before the divine philanthropy. If even the demons speak when they're loved. The moment that the chasm between the two is bridged. You see the whole chasm there in the middle? The tombs, the possessed pigs, that whirlwind, right? But on the other side, you see here. The Logos now embraces the irrational and converses with it. It engages the destitute and marginalized. It brings life to those living on the margins of death. It's a form of resurrection. The demoniac, or demoniacs, in one of the Gospels is two. In the other, it's one. Lived at night in the tombs, went around almost naked, right? And people tried to bind them with chains and they couldn't. You know, when people are on drugs and they're high, they become very powerful. In America, we have a lot of that. And they tell you, don't engage them at all. Don't even try. The demoniac was like that. So he lived on the margins of death, literally what death is. And now what we have before us is a form of resurrection. The 16th century icon has its own time and world, right? But it also makes room for the outcasts of our time. We see them enter Iakovou's icon, those of our time, right? And take their place inside it. I still cannot take that image of the rabbi and the beggar out of my mind. It was just like, ooh. And the love that he had for the man. Oh. So, when we see the people of our time enter this image, they carry our time and world with them. The icon becomes like an open space, right? And they walk in. They come in. And the reverse. The demoniacs, they leave their epoch and enter ours. They come here. Imagine icons then, in which multiple worlds and moments converge in perichoretic union, in a coherence, right? Enhancing each other with their presence and life. Images living in and across tradition. And now, right? The now is part of tradition. The now is not outside tradition where I sit in the now and I look back in the past and that is tradition. No. No. So, are such images possible? I don't know. You, the iconographers, do. But I think they are possible if Orthodox iconography enters deeper into its theology and the Neptic life. There's a lot in theology that we haven't discovered yet. Patristic theology. So if we do this, and we turn to our tradition and world with a renewed eye and mind, I think iconography also can become a much broader, much more creative in many ways realm and way of being. So these were my thoughts for tonight for you. Thank you.